Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar entitled The New Customer Experience Challenge, Creating Digital and Data-Led Interactions. This amazing panel of experts will take us through how organizations can design digital customer journeys that still maintain the human touch and how data is key to making that determination. Our thanks to EXL for bringing us this program today. So please welcome Rahul Arora, Senior Vice President and Head of Emerging Business Unit UK and Europe for EXL. Rahul, it's all yours.
Thank you, Debbie, and a very warm welcome and thank you for joining us today for our session on the new Customer Experience Challenge, creating digital and data-led interactions. Now, before I start with the discussion, I would want to welcome our group of panelists who've been in the CX space for long. Just to introduce the panelists that we have for today, the first one is Matt Egan. Matt is a former customer director at Centrica, British Gas, where he was responsible for the design, planning, control, and delivery of customer service journeys. Matt is a chartered accountant, and prior to joining Centrica, he led group finance operations for Vodafone, with responsibility for teams in the UK, Europe, US, and Asia operating financial processes. So a warm welcome, Matt, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks,
Quickly moving on to the second panelist that we have from a very different industry, Nick Mcfarlane. Nick is a globally recognized customer experience leader with 20 plus years of experience across Europe in the automotive and telco sectors. And after 11 years at Sky, he has just joined Kazoo as their head of customer experience optimization for emerging markets. Having started his life as a customer service advisor, he's big on the human side of customer experience and really listening to your customers to drive the best possible outcomes. Again, Nick, a very warm welcome to you, and thank you for making time for this webinar.
Thanks, Rahul. Pleasure to be here.
Cool. So before diving into the topic, I wanted to quickly cover the agenda for today's webinar. I will start by covering some of the CX challenges that we see in the market as a service provider and as a CX practitioner. We work with a lot of global companies, FTSE 100, and we try and help them embark on this journey. So we'll talk a little bit about the challenges that keep us up at night, and stress the importance of having best-in-class customer experience, which would be followed by a panel discussion between Matt and Nick. And I'm sure they'll bring it to life with the examples from their perspective, given they're running such large CX transformation for these global companies. That will help everyone to understand how it's happening on the ground from the experts. And now, without further ado, if we can quickly go through a couple of pages. Now, the first page really was to talk about what is keeping us awake at night from a CX standpoint. And I'm sure people who are listening to us would relate to this. What we've seen with our customers, it's really the siloed approach that we have between front and back office. The CXOs are getting really worried about how data is not being used to derive on real-time insights to deliver superior customer experience. There's a lot of misalignment that we see between employees, EX or CX, which really drives poor customer experience. Also, what we've seen, use of technology. A lot of large companies and corporations are on legacy platforms. They want to move to cloud-based digital platforms, but they're not too sure when and how they should start with this journey. Again, drives very poor customer services or customer experience if you're not planning it well. Also, the problem that we've seen is how do you bring the right mix of humans and machine. And when I say humans and machine, it's humans and AI. When do you let AI manage your customer experience, and how swiftly you bring in humans to take over those complex conversation or interaction with the customers? Of course, everyone wants to embark on this journey, but but customers don't want to spend a lot of money on this. How do you do it in a controlled way, wherein the agility is not lost, but your cost to serve is not going up as well? So, and then I'm sure that there are other challenges that you'll come to know when our panelists talk about it. But from our experience, this is what we've seen, for CXOs to worry about when they think about customer experience. Now, if you move to the next page, we'll talk a little bit about the importance of customer experience. And these are some statistics that we have. I'm sure you guys would also agree to how we are thinking about it. So if you go to the next page, you would see that almost, and we do this all the time in terms of analyzing the data and doing surveys, we've seen that customer experience is the core which will differentiate companies not only today, but for future as well. Now, 89% of businesses that we've really worked with, they are expected to compete mainly on customer experience. They want to grow their top line, but they want to do it with a superior customer experience. So the competition really here is who delivers better customer experience. Now, if you go to the next page, it will really talk about what customers, the end customers, are willing to pay. They're ready to pay a premium, and you can see 16% more cost to serve or more price that the customers want to pay just to get better customer experience. Now, these are just numbers that show you the importance of why customer experience or CX is so important in today's discussion. Now, the third data point that we have, if you move on, is about how you can increase the customer retention or decrease the churn within your portfolio if you have a very proactive customer experience approach. Again, all of this will come to life when Nick and Matt will take us through their experiences. And also, if you move to the next point, Kerry, what you'll see is the operating margin for organization go up almost 3 times if you start from the customer rather than designing processes around the customer. If you put your customer services or customer experience at the core, you are definitely going to make a higher operating margin. And if you were to move to the next point, Kerry, quickly, what I want to do now is open it up for this discussion between Matt and Nick in order to bring this to life. Now, Matt, Nick, if you guys are ready, I will start this conversation by asking both of you the first question, which is really, how do you define customer experience in the new normal? Matt, if you want to start, and then Nick, if you can follow on.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rahul. And I certainly recognize some of the challenges and trends that you talk through there. Look, I think customer experience for me, I like to keep it really simple, and it's effectively how the service meets your need. And I think that, that's a very kind of traditional view, but if you break that apart, you've got the service that's being delivered and what the customer needs. And I think partly to some of the insights that you summarized there, I think companies spend a lot of time on the service, but where the real gold is, I think, is understanding the need. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about today about uncovering the need of the customer and really getting focused on what the customer absolutely wants. And I think that's, for me, is part of the definition of customer experience, but where the hard work and the opportunity is really understanding what customers want in kind of this environment, and using kind of digital technologies and other things to do that. Because if we don't understand what the customer needs, you've got no chance of knowing whether you're going to meet, exceed, fall short of those expectations, and it'll also lead to over or under investment. So I think that's kind of where the part of the definition, but where there's needed for increased focus. Nick,
100% agree. Yeah, thanks, Matt. 100% agree with that. I think you've got to understand the needs. I kind of look at customer experience in a couple of ways. There's one thing that I always say, which is, we consider ourselves a bunch of humans trying to make another bunch of humans' lives easier. We're not going to go too far wrong in the customer experience space. And then the other one, I'm going to go a little bit crazy, born out of a conversation with my brother I had recently. It's been kicking around in my head ever since. So he's a senior lawyer at a well-known startup. And we were reflecting that actually our jobs, him in law, mine in CX, were very similar in that it's all about doing the right thing in the legal profession, clearly the right legal thing, but in the customer experience world, doing the right thing for the customer. And actually, you have to bring a load of people together, be the subject matter experts, help those different areas of the business find solutions that help you do that right thing. So I'm going to go, really crazy, as I said, and say I'm going to define customer experience in the new normal as the new lawyers, and see how that goes.
Sure. No, that was perfect, because the way we think about it, Nick, Matt, is meeting our customers where they want us to meet, rather than trying and take them onto a journey without even understanding what they need. But you've absolutely articulated it well, both Matt and Nick. That takes me to my next question, which is, in today's time, we live in an experience economy, wherein customer value how they experience brands above all, which extends to both online and offline channels. Now, both of you've been leaders in customer transformation programs for past few years. It'll be great if you can talk us through, the changing customer needs and experience that you've witnessed over the last, 2 to 3 years. How do you see that evolving with digital kicking in? There's a lot of hype around data. So if you can talk a little bit about, how you think the customer experience is evolving, if I may say. So again, I'll follow the same suit. Matt, if you can start, and then Nick.
Yeah, Rahul, I've been thinking about this question, and I think what's quite funny for me is the key trend that I think is still influencing customer experience is multi-channel or omni-channel. And you kind of asked for the kind of latest trend, but that's something that's been around for so long. I remember I think it was when I was working in Vodafone Australia, we were talking about omni-channel and multi-channel and how do we make this work, etc. And that was in kind of mid 2000s, and when we were kind of getting ready to deploy digital journeys, etc. I think that the changing dynamic is that we've now got comfortable with this kind of multi-channel approach. But I think that it's still a challenge to coordinate and orchestrate all of those different channels so that the customer gets a good experience. And I really think that's most companies are still grappling with that, because the challenge is you've got to spin up channels to your point, meet the customer where they want to be met. But you've got to do that in a way without necessarily knowing how they're going to navigate your channels. And so you kind of need to partly anticipate, but partly build everything such that they can go anywhere they want at any point in time. So I think that's one key trend. The other couple I'd probably name, which won't come as any surprise, is timeliness. I think the patience of customers is quite short, so that everybody expects everything now. And I think that's kind of the digital era, not necessarily led by customer experience, but just the general consumption of technology. Everybody, years gone by, you could wait for a bank account transaction to turn up on your statement the next day, kind of thing. Now, if you transfer it, it's not there 2 seconds later, you're kind of sitting there wondering, oh, did that go through? So it really gives an indication for the sort of expectations on timeliness. And then the last one I'd probably mention is the willingness to engage completely digitally. And I think by that, I mean, I think early on, digital was seen as a way to expedite or smooth or engage with a human ultimately. But today, customers want to engage with organization systems and architecture by themselves. They don't really expect, in many situations, it's horses for courses, obviously, depending on what's being delivered. But I think most organizations, there would be an expectation that customers can engage with your systems directly without any human experience. And I think that's quite new, because previously digital was a way to replicate what you were previously doing with a human. Now it's there are new journeys and experiences that are devoid of any kind of human contact from the organization, at least. So there are a couple of things that I think are the current challenges.
Sure. Nick?
Similar sort of answer from me, and I love the point Matt made about the sort of omni-channel piece and how we've been grappling with that for years. Because I think my thoughts on this question were, fundamentally, I don't think customers' needs from organizations are changing. They've always wanted us to provide solutions that fit in with their lifestyles, their ways of doing things, what they want, whether that be speed, huge level of information, just agreeing with them, whatever, and making sure that it's all quick and effective, and showing that as an organization we care and we're putting them first. It matters to us that we find a solution. I think the problem in today's world is the accepted ways of doing things are changing all the time, and they're different for different groups of people, different generations, different customers. That sort of move to digital and digital being so much more prevalent doesn't work for everybody. It's supposed to make stuff simple, but does it, or are you taken off down other paths? So I think really the important thing for us is good service design that offers the best thing to your audience at the right time, and that puts so much more focus on knowing what it is that your audience want, not just sort of guessing and going, so I'm 47 years old, this works for me, I'll do it this way. But the 22-year-old guy who's just used to doing everything natively on his phone doesn't want to do what I want to do. So yeah, I think that's the way that I think about that one.
So Nick, just to pick on that, what you're saying, it's more about segmenting the customers and really catering to the way they want to be dealt with. The expectation is still the same. They want to be serviced, but not everyone wants digital, and not everyone wants to be online or offline, right? So you're talking about customer, and the reason I bring it because data becomes important here when it comes to customer segmentation. Is that the right way you're thinking? I'm thinking about.
Yes, it is. I think I wasn't necessarily thinking segmentation. I was thinking just doing the right thing for the right person at the right time. But clearly, segmentation is going to come into that, because you can't be doing service individually for everybody. But yeah, exactly that data sort of led approach that, and you're sort of back to the true omni-channel point, right? We should be able to offer the channel of choice to the customer. So it may be that because certain things about the customer, you only offer that channel, or because you don't know, you offer all the channels and you let them choose and then you capture the preferences. But it's kind of like, I want to be setting something up that allows people to do business with me or service with me in the way that they choose rather than the way that I choose.
Got it. No, that's great. Thanks, Nick. I think related to the same point, again, and Matt, I'll start with you. You really spoke about omni-channel. Nick spoke about, again, not everyone is the same. We need to think about segmentation, and we need to think about how you service each customer the way they want to be serviced. Now, when all of this is happening, do you see there's a changing relationship between customers and companies? Again, you've done utility, you've done energy, and then you've done telecom. You've got a varied experience, Matt. How do you see that changing in today's time?
Yeah, I think, I guess building on my earlier point, Rahul, one of the changes I do see is the willingness to engage with systems directly. So, go back and if I talk to my parents, for example, and I'd say they're in their 70s, I'd say average for their age in terms of, let's say, technical ability. I have to sort out all of their iPads and iPhones and things every time I go home. But they grew up in a world where the company was represented by people. And I think they still find it a little bit difficult to realize that I can get done what I need to get done without any person being involved. So that's a little bit about what I spoke about in terms of willingness to engage with systems. The other thing that's changed the relationship is probably the rise of social. And, earlier in my career, the way you'd get feedback from customers is if you went out and asked them by some means, and/or you had some sort of newspaper article coming out, good or bad, but you had like days to prepare for it, etc. Now, everything you do as an organization is public. People are posting about it, about their own individual experiences. You've got comparison websites, Trustpilot. And I think that has changed the relationship as well, because what it has meant is that it's very transparent, the level of service you're providing. And then I think there's an impact on loyalty, because I think a lot of people are quite habitual in their use of services. And this transparency and the public data that's available has really shifted that relationship. So companies can no longer rely on habit as a source of loyalty. There needs to be some sort of value for the loyalty, i.e., good experience could be value, or things like pricing and products and all those sorts of things. But I think that's quite a different or a dimension that's certainly changed in recent years and continues to change.
Sure. Nick, what's your experience about the sectors that you operate in? I know you come from Sky, and Sky is, very different to your current industry. So how do you see that, Nick? What's your view?
Yeah, again, I think, customers make super quick judgments about companies and whether they like them or trust them or want to do business with them. And it stems from a sort of perceived greater awareness of what we do, what our strengths and weaknesses are, from things like Trustpilot, as Matt mentioned, but also from just, brand perception, brand positioning from Instagram pages and stuff like that. You can make a very snap decision on whether you think a company is going to be good at something or not. So, as an organization, you have to spend a lot more time curating and positioning that, and trying to set that perception that you are an organization that can appeal to a broad enough spectrum of audience to have a big enough customer base. And then I think there's another thing that's really interesting. We spoke about data before. I think there is an expectation from customers now that we know them, and it's a two-way relationship, in the way that, again, Matt spoke about his parents' generation. It was a human representative, and that is a genuine two-way relationship because there's a conversation. It's now not genuinely two ways, but they still expect this personalization and this sort of being treated like I bought this from you, you should know that I did, it means I'm likely to do this later. And you sort of, when you get into organizations, you can see why customers will think that, but you can also go, they haven't got a clue. There's no way we know that or can join that up. Now, we probably should, but we don't always. So I think, that has changed, and a bit to my earlier point, I think what hasn't changed are the fundamentals of service. Find a solution, find it quickly in a human way, show that you care. That still goes a really long way in the customer experience space.
Yes, they can, and I would 100% agree to that. Customers still expect the outcome. They don't care whether you do it through humans, machines, or how you do it, but they want the outcome, they want it their way, and they want it quickly, right? That has not changed. Of course, as Matt mentioned, the interaction is changing, the use of technology is coming in now, adoption of digital is also going up from a customer standpoint, and they want to really focus on that. Which now takes me to the next one. And Matt, I will point this to you, given that you were leading this entire digital transformation journey for companies. One of the key challenges that we've seen is making these customer journeys relevant and successful for the customers, right? Again, I come back to the same point. You can't have processes built around and then fit in customer. You have to put customer at the core and then design those journeys. Now, my question to you is, as you've led a lot of it for organizations, what's your view on how should one prepare, or an organization prepare themselves for this transition, which is moving on to these customer journeys, but making it relevant and successful for the customer? Matt.
Yeah, I think Rahul, it's probably in terms of a digital transformation, it's in some ways no different to other service transformations. I kind of break it down into probably 3 or 4 steps. First of all, I'll come back to understanding the customer need. That's just at the heart of everything, and I think that the uncovering the customer need to the point on using data, both to understand, things like what competitors are doing, what your own experience is, what customers actually want. There's a wealth of information that can be generated there, and that has to be the starting point. And strategically, it's the only choice, because you can't be all things to all people. So you really need to understand what it is that the customer wants. Secondly, using that to develop a vision, I think is also really key. You've got to have a service proposition. You've got to know what you stand for. Back to the kind of having a viable model that you can stand behind. Nick made the point is that you can't tailor the service to every single customer. We're obviously all aspiring to make it more personal and develop and use data and technology to make it as personalized as possible. But ultimately, I think you need, as an organization, to choose where you're going to invest in service, what you want your signature experiences to be, what just needs to be okay. And make that consistent with your brand and your offer, because that is okay. But you've got to start there before you even embark on changing anything, in my view. So that's kind of first step 1, and step 2: understand the need, develop the vision. And you'll notice that we haven't even got out the gates and done anything yet. Then I would say it's probably assess your capabilities, because there is so many different skills, and this is probably something that is also a bit of a trend. The number of niche areas that are required to operate together to generate a good customer experience, be it CX skills, data skills, development skills, empathy skills. There are so many different competencies that have got to come together. I think being really familiar with what you've got in your organization, what you want to develop, and then who you want to partner with, because again, you can't. I don't think that you can reliably deliver all of that with one organization. And then finally, getting onto the doing it, the building. I think what we've also learned is you've got to have a machine that is building ongoing. I think gone are the days when you can look at service transformation, digital transformation as a project, even a multi-year project. It is just something. It is just doing business now, and I think that mindset is still changing, I'd say. I don't think everybody's there. I think everybody kind of realizes it, and right down to ways of working, agile ways of working, all those sorts of things. Clearly that's front and center of how everybody's doing everything. But I still think there's a bit of a mindset in that people, or when you're in an organization, you're thinking, I'm transforming to get from A to B. But actually, you're transforming to get from A to a future destination that is going to change all the time, forever. And I think it's quite a different mindset to grapple with and to set up the right ways of working. So there's some satisfaction in the kind of small achievements, but also acknowledgement that by the time you get to where you started to your target destination, the goalposts have moved and you've got to keep going.
So Matt, having that vision right at the start is important, but you're saying this is an ever-changing destination, given the way technology is evolving, skill sets around the table is changing, ecosystem of partnerships that are existing. So, but having that vision that we want to make a change becomes really pertinent and important, isn't it? And do you think, Matt, this comes from from a CEO, or how do you see that flowing down, the organization?
Absolutely. I think it is absolutely CEO level or even board level. Like we're talking about what does the brand of an organization stand for? I'm kind of at that level. And to your point, you're quite right in that having a vision is kind of maybe in conflict with the fact that it's going to constantly change. But I think the vision should be so kind of purposeful and purpose-led that requires the whole organization to understand what it is that we are delivering for the customer in terms of the experience, having really good alignment around that, and making sure that the whole organization is lined up to it. And that's why I think it really does sit with the exec team, or however the organization's led, etc., to set that, as opposed to it being a kind of functional topic, because all parts of the organization need to line up to that. And customers see all parts of the organization. They don't know, when something's being delivered by function A versus function B, etc., which is why it's got to be so pervasive in my view.
Got it. Makes sense. And Nick, any thoughts on this one in terms of how do you embark on digital transformation? Let me just make it little specific here in terms of digital transformation. And I heard you earlier that at the end of the day, customers want the service to be delivered the way they want. They don't care whether it's human or machine. So is there a danger that you see when we get onto a digital transformation, we adopt AI, that you really start eroding the human side of things, and sometimes you just join the bandwagon because everyone is talking about digital, so I'll also do digital transformation, there'll be AI, but without really impacting the human side of it? To my mind, the last mile, the human side is absolutely critical and will always be critical. But again, it'll be great to hear your views, Nick, on that one.
Yeah, I think, similar a bit to what Matt just said, right? The customer doesn't care what our own silos think is amazing that they're doing on their own that all stack up into something. The customer cares about what they get on the day. And I think, again, to Matt's very first point, that is all about understanding what they need from us, right? So I think, to your point about losing the human connection with the sort of proliferation of data and AI and all of that sort of stuff, we just have to make sure we keep the customer's real needs in mind. And I think, you look at personalization, I think there's a bit of a growing sense that too much of that, or it done wrong, is a little bit spooky or a little bit Big Brother, in that, Jesus, they know like loads of stuff about me. I remember we launched a new OTT business for Sky in Spain 5 or 6 years ago, and Netflix at the time ran an ad campaign saying, to the one person who watched whatever movie this month, we feel sorry for you. And I said to my boss, we should run a return response campaign saying, don't worry, we have no idea what you watched. But it's really interesting that there was a negative response to that Netflix campaign, because people like actually stopped and realized when they saw it above the line that, crikey, they know everything I watched down to the minutiae of there was one guy in the whole of Spain that watched this particular movie. And what judgment does that say about them? But I think, coming back to that needs thing, the reality is you need to know your customers so that you can work out what is the right thing for them, digital or human, at that time, what suits them, what technology, what sort of thing are we trying to drive? What is the outcome that we're trying to drive? What are they going to want to get out of it? So it's a challenge. And I think, going back to the point of how do you set out, you have to set out at a level that, comes from the very top. We want to do the right thing for our customers. Moving to Kazoo just in the last month, they use a term that they're customer obsessed. I've heard that in so many organizations, but it actually does in a 2 to 3 year old startup feel like real, more so than it did in a massive corporate environment. Like everyone is literally chucking in ideas about how can we do that, but you've then got to define, right, so our main thing is offering a 5-star customer experience. What is that? How do we get to that? So everybody's pulling in the same direction.
Sure, Nick. And just to pick on one of the points that you made, which I'm also very passionate about. But let me just hear it from Matt as well. Matt, what do you think about ultra personalization as we move into this, segmentation, understanding the customer need, or segment of one or whatever, everything that's floating around? Is there a danger that we are getting into this, as Nick was saying, too much into customer's life and making it difficult for the customer itself, or we are hyper personalizing the entire thing, wherein customers are not really happy about? So what do you think about that, Matt?
I think it comes back to what the service proposition is and whether there's going to be any value in that really for the customer, because in some cases, working in the energy sector, for example, there are elements of the experience that you want to be personalized, but there are elements of the experience that you're quite happy for it to be quite generic, and actually it's somewhat helpful for it to be generic, so you can compare and contrast your experience or the service you're receiving with others and put a bit of value on that. So I think that it's easy to say, the utopia would be that every customer has their precise need met. I just don't think it's realistic that you will uncover their precise need, be able to serve that up. And I think it's marginal gains once you get to unless you're operating what I would say is a premium business or a premium service business. So if you're charging a lot of money to offer very bespoke service, then it absolutely needs to be ultra personalized. But I'm thinking about high net worth wealth banking, those sorts of services, or where you've got potentially an individual who's assigned to another individual, and clearly that needs to be absolutely 100% tailored. But from there, it's a spectrum right down to kind of mass consumer delivery. And I think you just need to decide where you want to sit on that spectrum. But to aspire, I think it's a really good question, because I do think that there's a generic movement to say everything needs to be personalized, but I just don't necessarily think that that's one, achievable or gives value to the customer all the time.
Sure. So you're really talking about, Matt, is which industry you are in, what kind of business you're running, what kind of customer base you have, And when it comes to utilities or everyday mass consumption, the way you spoke about, it might be counterintuitive in terms of doing hyper personalization, because it might not give you the returns, because it's not adding any value to customers' life. Might be they're not even looking at it. Yeah,
Absolutely. And I've heard conversations where you're listening to calls that come in from customers, and they've said, I can't believe you're spending time on this element of my account or my service, or having this conversation with me. This is why my bills are so high. So, you've got to be very careful about, to your point on industry, and that, that's not a dynamic that happens across all industries, but there needs to be perceived value in the eyes of the customer of that personalization. Otherwise, there's actually a risk that they will see it as a decrement to their overall experience.
sure, makes sense, Matt. Nick, any views on that?
Yeah, so I think you can definitely get over personalized or ultra personalized, and it doesn't help you, and you will never meet every individual's needs. I think I'm a huge fan of using conversational analytics to build a true picture of how your customers really feel about things. So I think so much of the data that we tend to see or we tend to use to trigger personalized experiences is kind of actually behavioral, and we don't know the customer's why behind that. So also, I don't know, think to OTT television. I used that example before, right? We used to know that 36% of people turned off auto renew on the first day. Easy stat. So you take loads of actions to try and stop people turning off auto renew on the first day, which would involve you sitting in a room together going, why would you turn off auto renew on the first day? What can we do to stop you doing that? But actually, if you're pulling in all of your contact center conversations, all of your social media interactions, all of your Trustpilot reviews, all of your App Store reviews, central source, build a great model that spits out insight across your organization that, gives a real sense of what customers' emotions were, sentiments were, other feelings. We also used to track whether they'd mentioned the fact that they were going to leave because of an issue, and build a sort of churn propensity into this data as well. You build this much more rounded view of a customer, and you can look at that on an individual 360 level of the one customer with all the behavioral data, or you can use it to try and achieve some of what we were talking about in the personalization space, but on a more generic customer level, in that, we know that most customers feel like this in this situation. And the one example that I was really proud of that we managed to do in Sky was look at our contact center conversations, right? And we said, wouldn't it be cool if we could track the evolution of the customer's emotions through those calls into the contact center? So we played around, because we knew we could see emotion in other things. We played around with it, and we ended up with this graph for a quarter's worth of conversations, had about 10, 12 of the key emotions being shown by customers in what they were saying to us. Most of them just sort of hovered along the bottom. Confusion went down over the course of the conversation, and happiness went up. So you take that away and you go, so whatever we're doing, however we're talking to our customers, we're taking their confusion down and their happiness up. Our customer service teams have got to be doing a really good job here in general across the quarter. And then you can sort of drill into that further. And as I say, use it as that overall guide to, we're getting the emotional connection right, we're getting the sort of outcome right, or you build it into a single customer view of, what they were doing. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to exploring a bit more and trying to do a bit more in, because I think there's so much power in getting that why behind the behavioral data that you're getting from your own systems.
Now that's a great segue, Nick. I was thinking about the data side, and you've brought it so beautifully on a call. How do you assess the emotional state of the customer using that data? Now, I know, Nick, you've done a lot of work in this space, but how easy or difficult it is to really bring all the data together. You spoke about call data, and I'm just taking this example that you just gave, but there are other touch points that you have with the customers. So how, and have you done that, really bringing all of it together to come up with a strategy or a view of the emotional state of the customer that you would use, right? The example that you were giving, because a lot of
Yeah,
these organizations that we work with, Nick, Matt, they're really thinking about how they should be using various sources of data to bring them together to really drive meaningful real-time insights. So again, to both of you, if you can talk a little bit about data. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I think firstly, to your first point, it's really difficult to bring all your sources of data together, and actually to improve your service or to improve your experience, you probably don't need to. You probably just need to understand what a few key sources of data are, and what you want to really focus on for what you want to change. I mean, my biggest experience in this space was in that conversational analytics, pulling together everything people said across all of those channels, partnering with a provider who brought that together, used AI-driven sort of natural linguistic processing to give you the insight. And it was so powerful, but it came from a view of, I want to just understand our voice of the customer a bit better so we can fix pain points. Didn't actually get it to the point of stitching together some of that data and some of the behavioral data and bringing like, okay, so tell me about Rahul. What's his emotion been since he's been a Sky customer? When he contacts us, what does he think? When he, I think that's nirvana and that's the end goal. But ours was very much more like just use it as if we see enough customers with this type of experience, it's probably wrong. So find the pain point, fix it. So yeah, I think it's about how do you want to use your data, and I think most organizations now have so much data. You need to have people that have a bit of imagination about how they want to use it to make a difference. And I used to say to my team, we've now got this conversational analytics technology in place. The only thing that's limiting us about what we can find out about our customers is our imagination about what we want to ask the tool. And then, that goes back to the old survey dynamic that you only get the answers to the questions that you ask and stuff. But I think sometimes there's too much data and it filters up and up and up to the exec who think that they know, based on a couple of key metrics, everything they need to know. And some brilliant stuff gets lost. So that's one of the biggest challenges for data with me. How do you actually use what you've got?
Sure. And Matt, what's your view on data?
I was just nodding along. I totally agree with that. I think your question, Rahul, was along the lines of, has it become more challenging? I think in some ways it's become easier technically. The technical ability to stitch together data has just come on immensely. So with cloud technologies, it's easier than ever to join your call center data with your transactional data, so that the technology and the technical challenge almost is being removed, and it'll all be done quite quickly. But to Nick's point, where we're left is needing to ask the right questions, and I think that is a real challenge. So the sorts of skills that are required there, think like cognitive reasoning, the ability to avoid bias, statistical analysis, some of those skills I think are becoming increasingly important in the CX space, because to Nick's point, you can easily just get lost, and you're at real risk with so much data of doing these thin slices. The renewals example that Nick mentioned, for example, you could spend months on that data problem and trying to solve it, but it may be the wrong problem to solve for the overall good of the organization. And you could easily go down that rabbit hole, and with so much data available, I think that is the real challenge. Yeah. And I was also nodding at a single insight floats its way up to the exec, and suddenly it's the global truth driving the organization. You really have to be very careful about that. I recognize.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very relevant and insightful, Matt, Nick. We have 10 more minutes, and I don't want to miss out on a very important aspect of CX, which is EX, employee experience, people. Both of you lead large teams, whether it's contact center, whether it's field operations, whether it's your back office. How important it is to align EX to CX, and how does one go about doing that? I've seen a lot of challenges in this space, so it'll be good for people to hear from you. If how do you guys navigate EX and CX, and how do you align them so that everyone is singing from the same hymn sheet, and everyone is thinking about CX the way senior leaders are thinking about it? Again, I'll start with you, Matt, and then we'll move on to Nick.
Yeah, I think wow, big question for the last 10 minutes, Rahul. That's but two things that come across or pop into my mind when you talk about it. First of all, just having a service mindset, I think, is something that I try to kind of engender in the organization, and that's in the interests of the relationship between EX and CX. I think if employees don't feel as though there is a service mindset, i.e., the organization and their fellow colleagues are there to help and serve, then I think the ability to translate and the likelihood that you're going to get a good customer experience outcome is low. Whereas if you can create a culture where there's a service mindset, i.e., I am here to serve, but be it the customer or be it my colleagues, I'm here to help. I think that's a really important foundational stone to having a good customer service organization, is that internal experience. So creating that environment, culture, the experience to do that. And then I come back to the vision. You talked, Rahul, about how do you get everybody on the same page. I think coming back to that, being really clear about your service proposition, communicating that, engaging employees in the development of it, because employees are customers as well, and having intimate knowledge of how things work, and you certainly get the majority of the feedback, I would say, from customers at the front line. So engaging them in the development of that vision, and then probably going overboard in terms of the communication and dialogue around that vision, I think is important. So in essence, having the service mindset and knowing where you're going and making room for that as a conversation is probably where I'd start.
Nick, what do you think about EX and CX?
So you said there was 10 minutes left. I was hoping Matt would go for about 8 or 9, but no, I'm joking. So similar. I think his service mindset is quite similar to my quote at the beginning about being a bunch of humans trying to help another bunch of humans, right? That doesn't necessarily have to be your customers. That can be other teams within the organization, everybody within the organization. I think it's about, continuing to communicate the human side of it. And I think it's quite interesting. I always get on really well with other customer experience people. And I think there is a bit of a shared mindset and a shared sort of humanness, and we like making relationships. We like talking to each other. We like talking. That's why I'm doing this afternoon. But, and for me, you set this example, or you try and show people where they fit in the whole, so they feel valued, so they see even if it's a really, I don't know, back office techie role that doesn't necessarily have a customer link, how important it is to the organization as a whole and to our customers. You just get this sort of culture of, I'm valued, I want to do the best work, and that becomes pervasive. And I think, CX teams are in a unique position. And I think that's perhaps why the link between CX and EX has become such a topical thing, is because you naturally touch so many areas of the organization and you're having those conversations, you get to see both sides of it, both from how your colleagues are feeling and how your customers are feeling. And it actually, it sounds simple, but just keeping that human side alive rather than just viewing people as, another just team that has to get this done for you is always really helpful for me.
Sure. So, Matt, did you want to add something? I saw you nodding, or you wanted to say something? Sorry.
No, I was just in violent agreement.
So no, I mean, this is absolutely great. I know we only have 5 more minutes. I will still ask this question because it's just playing in my mind. I don't want to have a sleepless night tonight, not asking you guys about one more thing. So as companies embark on this entire journey, my question is, how does how do you create an ecosystem? Because and then I heard both of you saying you can't deliver everything on your own, right? You need to create an ecosystem within your own organization that you're leading, but also a set of trusted partners. Again, how do you think about that creation of that ecosystem, and how does organization, they need to think about that? Again, Matt, if you can start, and I promise this is the last one, and then we'll wrap it up. Matt, you and then Nick.
So, I think we covered part of this, but just to delve a little bit deeper, I think being really clear on what your core competencies are and what you want them to be within your organization is a good starting point. And that's partly, it's not necessarily, I think, sitting down with a list of HR disciplines and ticking off to say we've got data scientists and we've got analysts and etc. It's a little bit of cultural and where's the organization been? What do you know you're good at? I think that's the starting point. And then in order to fulfill your vision, what do you need to be really good at? And that could be that's I think the starting point to identifying where you need help. And the help, to your point, it is an ecosystem. It might be technologies, it might be upskilling, and it might be partnering. And I think there's probably room for all of those elements. I would also say that whilst you do need many different disciplines and skills, I think doing it quite deliberately is important, because you can also create chaos with having an ecosystem that is very difficult to understand. On that point, I'd say establishing common ways of working is probably also important. So knowing how that ecosystem is going to work together, spending a lot of time on that up front is really important. So once you've got partners, technologies, whatever working, you want to understand how they're all going to work together. So talking about the how as well as the who is quite important, I think.
Nick, your final thoughts on this one?
Remarkably similar answer from me, or maybe not remarkably. I sort of look at my notes. It says, you want to be really honest with yourself about where you are strong and where you are weak, and therefore where you need help. And I think then, for me, finding a partner that you can be really open with and almost knock ideas around with becomes so important, because as Matt said, it could be tech, it could be upskilling, it could be ways of working and stuff like that. It's like, what I've found really useful in the past is a relationship with a partner that is so open that, you know, without giving any trade secrets away or anything, but they're telling you how stuff they've seen with others can help you. You're open about your challenges, how, you know, your organization works. It just makes it a much closer relationship that, you know, ultimately brings much more success.
Sure. We are right on top of the hour. I know we have got few questions, but you know, I don't know if we'll have the time to cover it off, because I wanted to wrap up leaving the key messages. We started off with how do you go about creating the vision for customer experience. We spoke about how important data is to drive that. We spoke about hyper personalization and how do you want to retain the human side of it, otherwise, you know, it can lead to a lot of problems. We also spoke about EX and CX, and very well understood the need of the cultural alignment within the organization if you were to drive that. And of course, we spoke about the ecosystem that one needs to create. On that note, gentlemen, thank you very much. This has been absolutely fantastic. This conversation could go on for hours. I loved, you know, asking you those questions, but we had a very interesting, you know, conversation about CX, and hopefully we'll continue this series. But Nick, thank you very much. I know you are incredibly busy and traveling, so thank you for making time today for this important subject. Similarly, Matt, appreciate all your views about everything that you're doing within this space. I really appreciate the time that both of you have put in. And I'll hand this back to Debbie for a final wrap. But thank you once again, gentlemen.
Thanks, Rahul.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks to all three of you, Matt, Nick, Rahul. This was really a great conversation. It is, of course, recorded and available for replay, and we will be promoting this out. We do, and in case you missed it for some folks that were not able to register. So if anyone out there has questions that didn't get answered, or you think about them after the fact, please go ahead and either reach out to the speakers or to me, and I'll make sure they get them. Thanks, and have a great day.